My sister and her husband moved in with our parents and are outraged that I refused to babysit their kids while they were planning to relax. My parents sided with them, so I moved out and stopped paying their bills. Why is she here? My mother's voice hissed through the grand foyer. Icy, sharp, like a blade slicing straight into my chest. My father didn't even bother to turn around. My sister Vanessa stood beside him, arms crossed, lips curled into a smirk that was half contempt, half amusement. No one said my name. Not a single glance acknowledged me as a person with a face, a past, or feelings. My very presence was enough to make all three of them turn away as if I were something filthy out of place and needed to be removed immediately. I still remember the day they kicked me out of the house. Winter. The year I had just turned 17. The ground was frozen, the wind sliced like knives, and I stood shivering in front of the colonial-style mansion I had once called home. In my hand was a torn backpack filled with a few old clothes and $14.82. There was no good luck. No goodbye hug. No one walked me out. My mother, Deborah Hayes, stood behind the curtain, a glass of red wine in her hand. Her eyes blank as if I were a debt finally paid. My father, Richard Hayes, said only one sentence. "You're grown now, Amelia. Go take care of yourself." It all happened in a matter of minutes. No one asked where I was going. No one asked if I had somewhere to sleep. Not even if I had enough money for dinner. Vanessa stood at the bottom of the stairs, phone in hand, filming me as I carried my bag out the door like it was some sick form of entertainment. She was 3 years younger than me, the golden child in my parents' eyes. Always right, always loved, always forgiven. And me, just a shadow on the sidelines. I walked away from the house without looking back. I was afraid if I did, I'd beg. But I had promised myself. I would never kneel to people who once called me a living disappointment. That night, I walked nearly 5 miles to downtown Fairview, where a 24/7 convenience store stayed open. I curled up behind an old bus stop, wrapped in a thin hoodie. The wind howled through cracks in the bricks, slicing into my skin like glass. My stomach ached with hunger. Every breath burned in my chest, but I didn't cry. I couldn't. Tears would freeze before they reached my cheeks. The next day I wandered the streets, looking for a place to stay. The church? Closed. The community center? Overcrowded. I tried getting a job at a bakery, a coffee shop. No one would hire a girl with no address, no social security number, no ID. My stomach growled so loudly that people turned to stare. That second night I slept behind a dumpster behind McKinley's Deli. The only warmth came from the kitchen exhaust vent. My clothes smelled like grease and burnt meat, but at least I didn't freeze to death. I curled up in my coat, hugging my backpack like it held the last piece of my childhood. Every sound startled me, a car, a metal door, a barking dog. I knew I could be robbed, assaulted, or worse, but I had no other choice. On the third day I tried getting a job at a car wash, but the manager looked me up and down and said, "We don't hire strays." I felt my face flush, but I kept my cool. I was used to being looked down on. That night, I went back behind McKinley's, but someone else had already claimed the spot. A homeless man sleeping with an empty bottle in his arms. I didn't dare go near. I walked around to the back of a small diner called Ruby's Grill. The back door was slightly open, warm yellow light spilling out. As I peeked inside, a voice called out, "What are you doing?" I jumped. A middle-aged woman stood in front of me, curly brown hair, flour-dusted apron, holding a long-handled ladle. She didn't look at me like a stranger. She looked like she had seen me long before I ever knocked. I was speechless. But before I could turn to leave, she said, "If you're planning to sleep behind my kitchen, you might as well mop the floor first." I froze. Then nodded. Her name was Ruby Delaney, owner of the diner. The first person in 3 days of hell who looked at me like a human being. Ruby didn't ask where I came from or demand answers. She handed me a mop, then gestured to a tray of chicken stir-fry noodles on the counter. "Eat first, then work." I ate every bite, then cleaned until midnight. When I finished, she pointed toward the back storage room. "There's an old mattress in the corner, not the cleanest but better than the floor." I nodded, fighting back the tears threatening to spill. For the first time in 3 days I had a hot meal and a place to sleep without rats. I pulled my hoodie over my head, lay down on the stiff mattress, and exhaled slowly. No one knew where I was. My family was probably having dinner in a warm room by the fireplace while I, Amelia Hayes, was sleeping beside a stack of storage boxes in a tiny diner. But I was alive, and I wasn't going to break. The next morning, I woke to the sound of clanging pots and the smell of crispy bacon filling the kitchen. My body ached. My eyes stung. But the feeling of lying on something real, not cold concrete, made me want to hold on to that moment just a little longer. "What are you still lying there for? Get up and mop the floor." Ruby's voice rang out, sharp and gruff, like she'd been a cook at a military base for 20 years. I jumped up, nearly tripping over the blanket tangled around my legs. But instead of scolding me, she simply gave me a quick look and tossed a mop in my direction. "Get to work, eat later." I mopped the floors, washed dishes, took out trash, hauled boxes, non-stop from morning until the last customer left just before midnight. My whole body ached like it was falling apart, but for the first time in my life I felt useful. After 3 days, Ruby handed me an old faded uniform shirt and a cracked plastic name tag. Amelia, kitchen assistant. Tears welled up in my eyes. Not because it was beautiful, but because for the first time I had a name, a role, a place, even if it was small. Ruby didn't say much, but her eyes always followed me. When I was dripping in sweat from carrying 10 plates at once, or when my hands turned red from scrubbing dishes in hot water without gloves, she'd quietly leave a towel or a box of bandages on the shelf. No compliments, but I knew she saw me. "You're not a bad kid," Ruby said once while I was peeling potatoes. "You just got kicked out of the nest earlier than most." I lived at Ruby's Grill for nearly a year, working 2 shifts a day, sometimes 3. Tips weren't much, but I saved every penny. I quit smoking, stopped buying candy, even gave up sleep just to afford night classes for my GED. I studied in the storage room after my shifts using library books. Some nights I fell asleep at the table, pen still in hand. But every time I remembered my mother calling me a burden, I gripped the pen tighter. When I turned 18, I passed the GED. Ruby didn't hug me or clap. She simply placed a small cupcake with a flickering candle on the table and said, "Congrats. Now it starts." I cried like rain that night, not from emotion but from feeling alive. I applied to Central Oregon Community College, majoring in business. I knew I couldn't wash dishes forever. I needed to understand money, contracts, how to run a business, like Ruby had done for 30 years. When I got accepted, I nearly screamed from joy. Ruby, as usual, stayed calm and tossed me a ring of old keys. "The storeroom won't cut it anymore. Take the spare room upstairs. You'll need it to study properly." I didn't know how to thank her. Ruby never said she cared, but she gave me a home, a job, and most importantly, a second chance. I studied during the day and worked at night. Some days I slept only 3 hours, but I didn't stop. I wouldn't allow myself to slack off. I carried a quiet rage inside me, at my parents, at Vanessa, and at the way the world once looked at me like I was trash. 2 years later, I graduated in the top 5 of my department. At the ceremony, I wore a navy blue gown and a trembling cap as I walked across the stage. No family came. No one took photos. But I recorded it and watched it over and over again, reminding myself, "You made it through, Amelia." I applied for a full scholarship to the Portland Business Institute, and to everyone's surprise, I got in. When I arrived in Portland, I had exactly $68 in my pocket and a notebook filled with dreams. I shared a room with 3 strangers, waited tables on weekends, and studied from dawn until midnight. I applied for every internship I could find, from organic dairy shops to hospital food suppliers. Then the opportunity came. I was offered an internship at Nutrimedics, a startup developing medical nutrition for cancer patients. It was unpaid, but I learned everything: branding, supplier sourcing, contract negotiation. I took notes at every meeting, asked questions from warehouse staff to the CEO. 2 years later, I graduated near the top of my class with an idea I had carried for years: a medical nutrition brand for people with special needs. Cardiac patients, diabetics, post-op recovery. I named it Reclaim because I knew what it meant to lose everything and to take it back. I took out a small loan from a young entrepreneur fund, added my modest savings, and started from scratch. I packed each product box by hand, delivered them on my bike, and live-streamed every night to promote their benefits. It took 3 years for Reclaim to gain attention. But when it did, it spread like wildfire across a dry field. By the time I turned 25, Reclaim was making $5 million in revenue. A year later, the company was valued at nearly $20 million after our first round of investment. I signed distribution deals with the largest hospital network in the Pacific Northwest, and Reclaim became a staple in clinical nutrition. When a reporter asked me the secret to my success, I just smiled. It started with a mop and one person, who didn't ask who I was. I haven't forgotten those cold nights behind the diner, the sound of my father's door slamming shut, or my mother's eyes filled with contempt. But I also haven't forgotten the smell of Ruby's baked pies, that first mop, or the look in her eyes when she saw me walk across that graduation stage. I survived. I rose. I became someone they never believed I could be. The scent of wine, expensive perfume, and white orchids filled the ballroom at the Ashbury Grand Hotel. The crystal chandeliers cast a glow across my burgundy evening gown, creating the exact kind of cold brilliance I wanted. Because tonight, I wasn't just attending an engagement party. I was present in a way they never imagined I could be. 9 years. 3,385 days since the night they threw me out like a stray dog. And now, I was back, walking across the marble floors among the well-dressed crowd. As if I had never been broken. As if I had never slept beneath a diner's kitchen stove. 1/2. The music stopped in a single beat. The first eyes I met weren't my mother's or Vanessa's, but Lucas Reed's, my sister's fiancé. He stood frozen, champagne glass trembling in his hand. His mouth parted slightly, as if he'd just seen a ghost from the past. I gave him a faint smile. One as cold as early winter. "Oh, look who decided to show up, my mother," Deborah Hayes said. Her voice cracked like a whip across the hall. The girl actually found her way here? All eyes turned toward me. Vanessa, the very glimmering diamond in my mother's eyes, wore a cream-white engagement gown, her arm wrapped around Lucas's, her face lifted like a 20-year-old queen. "You're not on the guest list," she hissed, her voice rising over the murmurs. Get out before you ruin my engagement party. I didn't say a word. The sharp click of my heels echoed against the marble floor as I stepped forward, each sound like a countdown. Richard, the man legally recorded as my father stood by the bar. He glanced at me once, then turned away, sipping his drink like I was nothing more than a fly in his line of sight. Perfect. Still the same old family, arrogant, dishonest, and so assured I would forever be that pitiful 17-year-old they left in the snow. I stared straight at Vanessa. I didn't blink. Surprised to see me? I said, my voice calm like a knife sliding from its sheath. What are you even doing here? Vanessa laughed with disdain. Looking for free food? A few guests nearby began whispering. I saw a young woman glance at her friend, hand over her mouth. Some of the older men stopped smiling, leaning in to listen. I came to say congratulations, I replied, pulling a black envelope sealed with red wax from my clutch. I handed it to Lucas. Because you deserve to know who you're marrying. Lucas took it, confused, but opened it anyway. As his eyes skimmed the contents, I watched the color drain from his face. His jaw tightened. His fingers clenched the envelope until it nearly crumpled. Vanessa, he said, each word forced through his teeth. Tell me what the hell this is. It's just garbage she made up, Vanessa shrieked, trying to snatch the paper from his hand. I folded my arms. It's a transcript from Oregon State Medical School. Clearly states, Vanessa Hayes dropped out in her second year. Never graduated, let alone became a doctor. The room erupted. Gasps, stunned murmurs, even a few mocking laughs filled the air. My mother's eyes narrowed like she wanted to burn me alive on the spot. She stepped forward, pulling Vanessa behind her, her voice like needles. That's enough. We don't need to hear any more of this filth. You have no right to be here, Amelia. I looked her straight in the eyes and gave a soft smile. You should know something, Mother. I never speak unless I have proof. And I slowly reached into my clutch again. This is a certified scan from the university's administrative office, signed and sealed. Lucas stared at Vanessa like he didn't know her. He removed the engagement ring, his hands trembling. You lied to me about everything. I didn't want you to think I was a failure, Vanessa cried, grabbing his arm. I thought you were real, Lucas said, pulling away. But you're just a knockoff trained by your mother since birth. My mother tried to remain composed, but I saw her neck tense, her pulse twitching beneath her skin. I turned to Richard. Still standing there, silent. Still not saying anything? Still turning away when things get ugly just like you did 9 years ago? He didn't respond. He just tightened his grip on his glass until it cracked. I lifted my chin and scanned the lavish ballroom. This space my family once believed was worthy of a perfect wedding. The expensive perfume couldn't mask the stench of rotting lies. Satin dresses, tailored suits, fake smiles, just masks over a family decayed from the inside out. You should be thankful, I said, my voice like wind gliding across glass. Because tonight, this is only the beginning. Vanessa nearly lost it. She lunged at Lucas to grab the papers, but he stepped back as if she'd just punched him in the gut. I didn't move. I stood still, holding a glass of orange juice. Cold, tart, and symbolic of this exact moment. You think some worthless pieces of paper can destroy me? Vanessa screamed, her face flushed, hair disheveled. I'm an intern at St. Helena. The whole city knows that. I smirked, then slowly reached into my clutch again, this time pulling out a sleek black USB. I held it up like it was a rare jewel. Well then, let's see who's lying, shall we? The room went dead silent. Whispers faded. A few guests sat down their glasses, eyes locked on me. On this USB, I said clearly, are complete records of correspondence between Deborah and Richard Hayes and the academic director of Oregon Medical School, including emails, scanned transcripts, and most notably, a small donation offer to cover up their daughter's expulsion for plagiarism. Lucas froze. You're serious? I nodded. No further explanation needed. He turned to Vanessa, his voice cracking. You looked me in the eye and said you were in residency, that you'd have your certification in a few months. You swore on my grandfather's grave. Remember? Vanessa didn't answer. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Just trembling lips and wild eyes darting around the room. The same people who once fawned over her now stood feet away, as if scared to catch something contagious. My mother had regained a bit of composure by now. She stepped forward, her voice cold as steel. That's enough, Amelia. This little performance has gone too far. What do you want? Money? Fame? An apology? I looked at her like she was a rotting wooden statue trying to stand tall in a hurricane. Then I laughed. Not out of anger. Not out of sadness. Just pure contempt. You still don't get it, do you, Mother? I don't want an apology. I want the truth to come out, and you know very well. I haven't even started. I stepped onto the small stage at the center of the ballroom, the one where the band had stopped playing because of the chaos. I looked around, locking eyes with one person at a time, then raised my voice. For the past 10 years, Hayes Family Health Clinic under Richard Hayes' name has submitted hundreds of fraudulent insurance claims, falsified medical records, unnecessary prescriptions, even fake patient visits, to pocket hundreds of thousands of dollars from insurance companies. A loud gasp came from the far end of the room. Dr. Manning, director of St. Helena Hospital, the very one where Vanessa had once bragged about her residency, shot to his feet. "Are you referring to the clinic on Maple Street?" he asked, his voice low and ice cold. I nodded, eyes steady. "That's right. And this," I held up the USB, "contains everything. Bank statements, internal emails, invoices, even audio recordings of meetings where Mr. Hayes instructed staff how to bend the rules for profit." Dr. Manning's face turned crimson. He snapped his head toward Richard, voice sharp with fury. "You used my hospital as a front? You told me your daughter was fully qualified to practice medicine, that she was seriously trained?" Richard tried to say something, but no one heard it. Drowned out by Dr. Manning's boiling rage, he turned to his assistant. "Get legal on the line now. I want attorneys here before I leave this room." My mother went pale. She rushed over and grabbed my wrist, whispering fiercely, "Amelia, are you trying to bury this family alive?" I tilted my head, leaned in close to her ear. "No, I'm just cleaning up the garbage you left behind." I yanked my arm free. Then from my clutch I pulled out a second USB, this one silver stamped with the IRS logo. And finally, I announced tonight's most exciting act. "For the past 10 years you've used my identity to commit tax fraud, underreporting personal income, evading federal taxes, even opening credit accounts in my name. This from the same people who once declared I was no longer part of this family." The room froze. A woman coughed on her champagne. A man collapsed into his chair like he'd just witnessed a death sentence. I spun the USB between my fingers, its metallic shine catching the chandelier's light like a silver bullet in a bloody fairy tale. "I submitted all of this to the IRS 3 weeks ago," I said calmly, "and I was informed that a formal investigation was opened." 2 days ago, Richard collapsed into a chair. Deborah turned ghost white. Vanessa was now on the floor, her wedding dress bunched, lipstick smeared. Lucas stood there watching them. 3 people who had once symbolized the perfect family, now crumbling like the ruins of a fallen castle. I stepped off the stage, my gaze slicing through the crowd one final time. "If you ever thought you could bury me, you should have made damn sure I couldn't claw my way out. But too bad," I smiled. "I didn't die. I came back. And I brought hell with me." No one moved. Time itself seemed to freeze. Every pair of eyes was fixed on me. The daughter they had erased from stories, photos, introductions. And now I stood at the center, not begging for a seat at their table, but burning it to the ground. The first sound to shatter the silence wasn't a protest or a denial. It was the heavy stomp of dress shoes on marble. Deliberate. Controlled. 2 security officers in black suits entered through the side door, followed by an IRS agent in full uniform. The polished badge on his chest gleamed like a nail sealing the coffin of my family's grand illusion. "Mr. Richard Hayes and Mrs. Deborah Hayes?" The officer's voice rang out. Clear. Neutral. Final. Richard struggled to rise, his hand clutching the back of his chair, eyes lost like he couldn't believe this was real. Deborah tried to compose herself, but the panic in her eyes and the tremor in her voice betrayed her. This is a mistake. We're the victims here. It's all because of her." She pointed at me, nearly screeching. "She's the one making this up. She's mentally unstable. She's obsessed." The officer didn't even blink. He pulled out a thick folder and tapped it with his ringed finger. "We have over pages of documentation, fraudulent tax filings, offshore accounts in Belize and the Cayman Islands, and patient complaints from Hayes Family Health Clinic. This is no mistake." That sentence was the final nail in the coffin. The 2 security officers stepped forward, one placing a hand on my father's shoulder, the other signaling my mother to set her purse down. "You can't do this to us," Deborah screamed. "We're people of status. We have attorneys. Your attorney will meet you at the federal station," the man in the suit replied, his tone colder than ice. Richard didn't resist. For the first time all night he looked at me, and his eyes, once filled with disdain and cold indifference, were now consumed by fear. The kind of fear that comes when everything you believed was untouchable begins to fall. His reputation, his power, and the illusion that his eldest daughter had disappeared forever. I didn't blink as they were escorted past the rows of banquet tables through the disgusted stares of those who once bowed before them. Some turned away. Some raised their phones. But no one stepped forward to defend them. Not a single person. Vanessa was still on the floor, her wedding dress twisted and rumpled, her makeup smeared like a painting washed out by rain. She clutched her head, her entire body trembling. She didn't scream anymore. She didn't deny. Didn't sneer. All that remained was a broken, exposed mess, stripped bare in front of everyone. Lucas stood a few steps away, his eyes cold as steel. Without a word he quietly removed the engagement ring from his finger and dropped it in front of her. The ring rolled a few times before settling amid the crumpled lace. The chandelier's light bounced off the metal, but it no longer held any value. "Lucas," Vanessa whispered, looking up. "I didn't think it would go this far. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Please don't leave me." "Sorry?" Lucas repeated, his voice hoarse. "You lied to me, to my family. You deceived a hospital and used your name to milk everyone's trust. And now you say sorry?" Vanessa crawled toward him, her dress dragging like the corpse of a swan through a grand ball gone wrong. "Ma'am, please," she sobbed, her voice fractured. "You're my sister. You know I didn't mean to, it was Mom. She made me. I didn't have a choice." I looked down at her. The one our mother once called the only pride of the Hayes family. The one who laughed when I was thrown out, who filmed it for the internet like it was some sick joke. Now she was on her knees, arms outstretched, begging for a thread to keep her from drowning. "You didn't have a choice?" I echoed, my voice barely above a breath. "And what about me? 9 years. Did I have one?" Vanessa burst into tears, black streaks of mascara sliding down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I'll do anything. I'll kneel in front of this whole city if that's what it takes for you to forgive me." I bent down, looked her straight in the eyes. Those once confident gleaming eyes that used to look at me like trash. "Forgiveness?" I let out a quiet laugh and shook my head. "No, Vanessa. Forgiveness isn't something you get to ask for, and it's not something I need to give." I turned away, leaving her trembling on the floor. As I walked toward the exit, whispers rose behind me like ocean waves. The crowd parted to make way as if I were a storm that had just torn through the room. I didn't look back. Not at my mother, not at my father, not at my sister. Because it was over, and I hadn't come back to save them. I came back to and it. I stepped out of the Ashbury Grand at exactly 10:12 p.m. The December wind whipped across my face, cold, but not as bitter as that night 9 years ago when I stood outside their house with nothing in my hands. This time, I didn't shiver. I didn't cower. I walked forward, head held high, every step steady like I was crushing the ashes of the past beneath my heels. City lights spilled across the pavement like an abstract painting, and in the middle of all that glow, I felt a strange peace settle inside me. A black SUV waited at the curb. The window rolled down, revealing a familiar face and a tilted smile. "All done?" Nathan asked, his voice soft like the night breeze. I opened the door and slid into the passenger seat, placing my clutch on my lap. "Yay," I said, tightening my seatbelt. "It's over." Nathan didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. He was the only one who knew everything. Every bank statement I'd gathered over the years. Every night I stayed up revisiting old paperwork. Every moment I wrestled between forgiveness and exposing the truth. He'd been there quietly, like a street lamp at an intersection, never pushing me one way or another but always shining just enough for me to see I wasn't alone. He looked at me for a long moment, then raised an eyebrow with that calm, dry wit of his. "So, what now? Want a drink, dance on a table, or burn your sister's wedding dress?" I burst out laughing, really laughing. Not the cold, mocking kind from earlier, but a true laugh, rising from my chest, light and clear like the first sound after a long, dark dream. "Cake," I said, eyes still sparkling. "I want cake. A big slice of something sweet with frosting, chocolate, and lots of strawberries." "Cake?" Nathan tilted his head with a grin. "You just turned a banquet hall into the crash site of a prestigious family legacy. Walked out like a queen stepping off her throne. And now you want cake?" "Yes." I nodded, eyes fixed ahead. Because I didn't do all that for revenge. I did it to be free. And there's no better way to celebrate freedom than with a really good slice of cake. Nathan went quiet for a second, then pressed the gas. The SUV glided smoothly down the street, leaving behind the blinding lights of the fancy hotel, and heading toward the part of town where we both felt we belonged. The place with jazz music spilling from a little corner cafe, and an old neon sign that read, "Grace's Bakery, open late." Grace, a retired 5-star chef from Louisiana, opened the bakery after leaving fine dining behind. Nathan and I had been there a few times. She couldn't remember anyone's name, but she always remembered what her customers liked to eat. When I walked in, Grace was knitting behind the counter, her glasses slipping down her nose. She looked up at me, squinting. "The girl who loves chocolate cake with strawberries back again?" I smiled and nodded. "Tonight I want 2 slices, and a scoop of vanilla ice cream." Grace smirked and set her knitting down. "Something happen? You look like you just blew up a city." Nathan let out a short laugh. "Close enough, Grace." We chose the corner booth, my favorite spot where the lights weren't too harsh and the music wrapped gently around the unspoken silences. When the cake hit the table, I didn't wait a second. That first bite sliced through smooth frosting, the dense chocolate layers melting almost instantly on my tongue. The sweetness wasn't overwhelming. It was comforting. Like the first hug after years lost in the wind. "You know," Nathan said as he stirred his coffee, "I always thought you'd take them down in a much angrier way, like smashing things, screaming in their faces, going viral online." I smiled and dabbed the corner of my mouth with a napkin. I wanted to many times, but the further I went, the more I realized that anger doesn't set you free. It just drags you back into the same mud. But today, walking out of that hall, I knew I'd written my own ending. Nathan nodded. His eyes held pride. The kind you don't say aloud, but that you feel in the space between breaths. I looked out the window. The city at night wasn't noisy. It felt warm. Windows glowing soft gold, slow-moving buses passing by. In that moment, I felt truly alive. Not a forgotten shadow, not someone's burden. "I didn't come back for revenge," I said softly, almost to myself. "I came back to close it. To end that painful chapter and start a new one. With no bitterness, no fear. Nathan placed his hand gently over mine. Then welcome to your next chapter, Amelia. I nodded. The pain in my eyes was gone. The anger too. All that remained was a rare kind of peace after years of wandering. In that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I didn't survive to take revenge. I survived to be free. And now I truly am. For the first time, and forever. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that no one gets to define your worth, not even family. Despite being abandoned, betrayed, and used, she didn't crumble. She used her pain to rebuild her life from nothing. In reality, any of us could be an Amelia carrying wounds from the past, but fully capable of standing up, moving forward, and reclaiming ownership of our lives. Revenge isn't the goal. Freedom, strength, and self-respect are the ultimate win. What do you think about Amelia's journey? Would you forgive or walk away like she did? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss the next emotional, powerful family story.